And move to approve the minutes.
Motion's been made
Second.
and seconded. Any other comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. I will remind all of our committee members to make sure that you push your button to make sure that it's green when you're responding with your eyes, so they're picked up on camera. Thank you. Next, we have public comment. Is there anyone here who would like to make a
And
comment?
move to approve the minutes.
Motion's been made
Second.
and seconded. Any other comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. I will remind all of our committee members to make sure that you push your button to make sure that it's green when you're responding with your eyes, so they're picked up on camera. I feel like I just heard myself again.
Sorry about that.
Are we good to go? Okay, next we have public comment. Is there anyone here who'd like to make a comment to the committee that's not either on or off the agenda? Any forms turned in? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to our first business item, which is a public hearing and discussion action on a request for conditional use permit by Matt Parnell and Scott Getz to expand storage and workshop space by constructing an additional 1,560 square foot building at 811 South Division Street. Tim?
All right, thank you, Chair Zellner. Bear with me just a moment. There we go. Now we're working. We have a slight delay on the screen. The applicants are requesting approval of a conditional use permit that would allow a second building on the site at 811 South Division, as shown on the screen, included in your packet. And this, by the way, are on pages 7 through 14 of your packet. A site plan is included there showing the location of the desired building in between the two existing structures on the site. It's pretty straightforward. I'll say pole buildings style architecture, which is going to be very similar to the building that's on there currently. The size of the building is about 1,560 square feet, about a maximum of 15 feet in height. And all those things are okay by our code. One of the things I did want to point out is there is a provision regarding parking. So with this additional building, there are a minimum number of parking stalls required. And our code calls out the requirement that those stalls be paved. So what is included in your packet is a map, what you see on the screen, showing what at least staff's recommendation is for the area. We're not recommending that the whole lot be paved, just that front portion closest to Division Street that would allow for the siting of the parking stalls as well as ingress and egress to the site. I believe the applicant is here tonight and may there he is. Thank you. And may have some comments about the parking standards or about the paving requirement, but that is what staff is recommending, and we are recommending conditional approval available for questions.
Okay, before that, we're going to open up our public hearing for anyone who would like to make a comment on this topic. Is there any forms turned in, Tracy? All right, seeing nobody get excited to answer or say anything, I'm going to close the public hearing portion. Board or commission members, any questions?
I'm curious about on the north, it looks like is crossing the property line there as far as traffic coming in. They are, I've been giving them access to going out that way. Sorry.
Yeah, I've been giving them access to their yard through our property.
Is there a concern with this being paved and them still going in that direction?
Well, right now for the building we're proposing, the only concern I have is all this pavement, and I understand I have to ask for you guys to approve this, would be to wait until the next stage of development of this property, because we are going to be later this year, early next year, doing some more buildings. But for the building I have now, we had not budgeted anything for any paving. We just found out about this. And really the whole reason I'm putting the building up is just so I have some room for storage. I've got everything rented to 2 other Waunakee businesses, and I'm just I'm a home builder, so I don't have any place to keep all the different tools and parts and everything. So I would be asking that I can forego the pavement until we start the next building. And just be able to use, at this point, just put the other building up just to use for storage.
Okay, thanks.
Brian, would you like to make a comment?
I would guess I'd like to ask a question just based on the fact that as I look at the map right now, my understanding is there's one existing principal structure and one existing accessory structure on the property, which is standard. The CUP is to put another principal structure on the property. And I guess I'm asking the applicant, are you talking about then theoretically putting a third principal structure on the property?
At some point, we would like to have this basically built out with like shop condos and maybe some future storage. So this whole property would be at some point in the near future completely built out with more buildings.
Okay, I'm just, for what it's worth, I mean, the normal rule is one principal structure for a property. So there's a fair amount of work that would need to get done to allow for this property to be built out in the way that it was just identified.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Kevin?
I guess my question is, how many parking spots do they have to have?
For what is there now and the new building, 4.
And how does the deadline work to get that work done? I mean, is it, he's saying, I'm not ready to do it, and we're saying we're going to approve this. So how does that deadline work to get that work completed?
There is a provision in the code that allows the plan commission to make a waiver to that standard. So I would say in this case, that's probably up to you if you wanted to assign a timeline to that. In the case right now, because asphalt plants are closed, this couldn't happen until, late spring anyway. So I think it's like June 1st or July 1st or something. The work has to be complete, something like that.
Gary?
Yeah, Matt, what's the size of that property?
That is 2 acres.
2 acres?
Yeah.
If I may, Commissioner Hertzberg, the lot size, 80,000 approximately square feet, lower left. Yeah.
All right, so 2 acres. Yeah, I mean, I'd hate to push them now to put blacktop in for 4 cars if there's a plan coming that may take some adjustment, but I mean, those sites are, in my opinion, underutilized in the village. I mean, you got a couple acres, not a lot of buildings on it, so I would think that would make some sense to see what their plans are going forward. Maybe to address it at that time for the parking, but again, that area could be utilized much better, I think, from a business standpoint. So,
Brian?
I was going to echo the same thing. I guess I am not adverse to making an approval on this building, but I would prefer to see what a long-term plan might look like, to the point that you brought up before, Brian. Before we even approve this one, I'd like to see what that is. Even if it means, over a period of years to build it out, what that might look like, so we get a better understanding and make sure that we're heading down the right path.
Chris, any questions?
No, the questions have already been addressed.
Brian?
No, I don't think I have any others.
So you said future build, and I think that's what some of our commissioners are struggling right now with, saying, all right, why would we blacktop it if there's going to be future build? Our village attorney, though, has said there's going to be a lot, well, not a lot, but complications to that when we have to add those buildings. So I would say to you, how long is your purview on when you're saying that?
Later this year or early next year, we have to do a lot of like our stormwater management and all our engineering work before we can really to do the design, and we can't really do that till it gets warmer. They can't really do all the elevations and all that stuff with all the snow and snow banks on the property. So it's going to be moving forward pretty quickly. The whole reason this building is, I just need some space for myself. That's why I'm here for this one building.
So with that, Brian, maybe you can walk us through a little bit what you're saying. I mean, if this is a year to year and a half, it sounds like maybe 2 years.
Well,
Can-
so I think potentially one path the plan commission could take would be to essentially put a deadline on when the pavement would need to go in. And that would be, let's say at the time that the, additional plans for the property is approved, within 2 years, whichever's earlier or something to that effect. I mean, there may be, one way that you develop this land is you put in one principal structure and you essentially then rent out space. And now you have one principal structure that complies with our zoning code. As long as it complies with the other zoning requirements, that's one way to build it out. And then theoretically you could have parking built at that point. But the idea of dropping in a number of different principal structures on the land and having, let's say, 4 or 5, ultimately, that's pretty inconsistent with every municipal zoning code there is. And so that's where I think a lot of work needs to be done to figure out how exactly would this site be improved. And I think if you're willing, I think you want to have some form of deadline to get that pavement put in, because that's also a requirement within our code. And so that's one option is to modify this, understanding that the applicant's either going to have to bring back something back that's going to get approved for you, or put in the pavement as identified on the map there within, let's say, 2 years or something, to give a little bit of time in case there is a way to improve, ultimately get to where I think Gary was at, which was, hey, I do want to see some pavement and some parking in there at some point, but I also want to see how is this ultimately going to develop, because I don't want pavement to be put in now and that essentially create an obstacle to potential better use of the land in the future.
Kevin, you're looking puzzled there. So question.
I guess so. What I'm hearing is we could approve this tonight, but there's no guarantee he's going to get building 4 or building 5 ever approved.
Well, there's not even an application right now, and we
Right.
don't know how that would move forward.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, I wouldn't have a problem tonight approving this, putting a deadline on the parking, and then whatever happens, happens. I worry that you might be handcuffing yourself a little bit, but that's his decision, right? Right. Just a thought.
I mean, the other way is to, have Matt work with staff a little bit more to try to lay this out. My personal thought is, I think we can improve it the way it is. But if Matt, if you guys think it'd be better to come back at the next meeting after you've had some time to kind of think through this, and maybe what your thoughts are, Matt, on how you really want to lay this out long-term. If that's beneficial, I mean, I can go either way on this thing.
Well, I have met with Tim previously about the whole project, and there's just a lot of stuff that's got to get done before we can, one of the issues we have is the sanitary sewer runs right through the middle of this property, which really divides it up. So that's a concern. MG&E, Madison Metropolitan Sewer is looking to probably reroute that at some point. That's another thing we have to work around. I say we got all the stormwater management plans to do, environmental corridor work. And it's moving forward. There's a lot of hurdles we got to overcome, yet this year, but the plan is to get something going, because this has been just a stagnant property since we bought it.
Okay, with all that said, do we have a motion that somebody would like to make in regards to this?
Yeah, okay. I'm just trying to think through. How to word this.
Do you want help with the direction that we would?
I mean, I like your
with-
thoughts earlier that you put a time frame on here of 2 years or whatever that is, to say, it gives the applicant some time. It gives us some time to look at this and really understand it better. at least he can move forward with, his plans. Cause I don't want to slow him down any.
Well, one of the things that you could do, so I'm looking at page 10 of your packet. Subsection 2E, the applicant shall pave the portion of the property identified on the map attached here to pursuant to plans approved by the Village Community Development Director on or before December 31st of 2024. That's almost 2 full years to get it done. And gives the applicant some wiggle room to come up with plans. I appreciate the fact that there may be a lot of work to be done there, but it also protects the village from the standpoint of, it is part of our code to have paving of this nature. You can see it on the property just to the south of that, I guess, and to make sure that, we're at least applying our code to a portion of the property.
I would make that motion with the change that Brian just added to section E.
So it's a motion to approve the site plan and conditional use permit for 811 South Division Street as recommended by staff and with the change discussed during the plan commission meeting.
Second.
Okay, so then we have a motion. So we have a motion and a second. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I'm still concerned about what this is going to look like in the future as far as number of buildings, because there's been a conversation about restrictions to potentially the number of buildings. So I would prefer to see even if it's just a real preliminary plan on what this might look like and understand how that impact or how that could potentially go through with our ordinance before I'd be inclined to approve this. I'm not against the building by itself, but I just think we need to have some more information.
I think I might have misunderstood or misheard what you just said, Brian, but just to be, and subsection C, just so you're clear, so, or everyone understand, no more than 2 principal structures shall be constructed and located on the property without an amendment to this conditional use permit. And then the next subsection D deals with the accessory structures. So I would say this, within the CUP itself, you should feel comfortable that no changes will be made to this property until it comes back to you. If that helps at all.
Sure, but is there going to be restrictions or are we going to have to go through a full CUP process to allow more than the structure that's being built now?
I think it depends on how it potentially would be redeveloped. So and again, there's not an application, but by way of example, if MMSD comes in and they said, you know what, we're moving our sanitary sewer easement, let's say to the west, so it's not running right through the property. One way to move forward with development of this land that actually wouldn't even require a conditional use permit is to build a larger structure on the property that satisfies our existing zoning provisions, and then essentially to rent out space. And, that's one way that you'd be able to utilize the property a lot. It's just difficult to try to tie down a process for you all without knowing exactly what would be done. But that's, I think, why we have some of the language in the CUP to make sure that it is going to have to come back to you in one way, shape, or form.
Okay, but one of the comments made was that it would be inconsistent with what we've done in the past. So with more buildings.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it certainly would have to come. So let's say.
That's where my concern
Okay,
is
yeah,
at
yeah,
is,
yeah.
okay, if we're going to approve a building now and there's a plan in the future that comes in and says we're going to throw 4 more buildings up.
There's no guarantee that you would have to approve that. And I'm to be blunt, I mean, my recommendation as village attorney would not to be allow 4 principal structures on one parcel. That it's one thing to go to 2. It's an entirely different situation to go to 3 or 4, which is why, as I'm talking about this, I'm trying to say you go back to one larger structure that then you just rent space out. And
that's where, for the applicant, are we handcuffing a little bit if we say, okay, we'll approve this building, you've got your additional building, and now we come back and say, well, that's all we got.
I don't think that you're handcuffing them, because whether you approve this tonight or not, you're going to have whatever the plan commission does. If there's a new application in the future, is not going to be bound by this decision tonight, no matter what the decision is. I guess I view it more as you're giving him the flexibility to move forward with this one building. You've set a deadline out for 2 years to get the parking done. And it may be that parking changes and the paving changes depended on how the property is proposed to be used in the future, but we just don't know how that is right now. But I do feel comfortable that the village is protected with this document, because this is the only change that's going to be allowed right now.
Okay, so we do have a motion and a second. Any other comments from people? and reminding you that you do need to have your microphones on when you vote. Okay, then I'm going to call it to question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay. Next, we have another public hearing and discussion action on 2023 through 2027 comprehensive bicycle, pedestrian, and outdoor recreation plan. Tim.
Chair Zellner, thank you. A lot of work has gone into this. This is a joint effort between the Village of Waunakee and Town of Westport. Just got a few slides highlighting what this process entails. And there may be a slight delay, but so the comprehensive outdoor recreation plan is a 5+ year plan used to guide development essentially of park and rec areas within the village, but also within the town of Westport. It is a necessary document that's required for receiving certain state and federal park recreational grants. In this specific case, the project was kicked off in about spring of last year. A fairly robust public input process was created by our consultant, MSA. We did receive almost 1,000 survey responses, so there was a lot of good feedback to what residents in the area want to see regarding recreation. And as you can see on the screen, things like trail bike infrastructure, off-street bike infrastructure rose up fairly high. You can see there's a splash pad there that's fairly high in terms of desired facilities. Before I go on too much farther, did all of you have a chance to at least look at the links, and did they all work on the draft plan? Good. So as you may have seen then, the plan consists of 7 different chapters as enumerated on the screen, all the way through recommendations and implementation. The form of the document looks very similar, as you may have noticed, to the last corp, which was adopted along with our comprehensive plan. Just a couple of highlights here. In terms of acreage, both Waunakee and Westport, and it's kind of the story is told in that graph on the right side of the page, actually is doing well above average and well above other municipalities in terms of parkland per 1,000 residents. So both jurisdictions have quite a bit of parkland and green space, those kinds of amenities that are the things that I think people are looking for when they're looking to locate in the community. So I think we're ahead of the curve, so to speak, on that. Another plan, some of the highlights. One of the goals of the plan is to ensure all residents are within a 10-minute walk, approximately a half mile from a park. And those walk sheds, I'll say, are enumerated in the green and the dark green boundaries there. So I think both jurisdictions have done a great job of at least identifying either current or future park sites that will allow good access for area residents and visitors. Potential for undeveloped parks. So you can see it's maybe a little bit hard on the screen. Blue triangles are sort of around the periphery of potential sites for future parks. So this plan enumerates that. Again, it's a 5-year plan. So next steps for this, this plan is also being reviewed by the Westport Plan Commission tonight. If you all recommend its approval, it will go to both town boards next Monday. And so with that, any questions? Oh, and I would like to point out our Parks Director, Sue McDade, and Public Works Director, Bill Frederick, are here as well. And they were very involved in this process.
Okay, commission members, any questions? Brian Melch, I'll start with you.
No, I don't have any questions. Look good. Spent a bunch of time on it this afternoon. Sure.
Perfect. Kevin Phelps?
Nope, no questions.
Chris Thomas? We can get to the public hearing after we make some comments. Brian? Joe?
I don't have any questions. I do want to thank everybody that was involved in the creation of this because the level of detail is fantastic.
Gary?
Yeah, I would just say that, Sue and Bill both put a lot of work in that, made it very open for public comment, multiple meetings, and I think did a really nice job incorporating as many people into the village's comments to really get a good plan. So.
I would echo that. So I'm going to open our public hearing for anybody who would like to speak on this topic as well. Do we have any forms?
We have one request from Eric Sullivan. It doesn't say whether he supports or opposed and nothing about wishing to speak. Okay, would you please go up to the podium?
I would urge the commission to table approval of this document until such time as some factual errors and some policy inconsistencies can be corrected or removed. We also have an election coming and 2 of the members are leaving this commission. So I would say that that also argues for tabling it. Documents like this have a way of becoming gospel for bureaucrats. I have had this document waved in my face, not literally, but metaphorically, by several people over the last 5 years with regard to several issues that I'll cover. Let's talk about Castle Creek Conservancy. The public record shows that the Conservancy came into being in the 1990s when the DNR blocked the village from developing to protect the wetland. In the Corp, the Conservancy is identified as a nature preserve, quite rightly, established for the protection of habitat with recreation as a second objective. Also in the document, the Conservancy is identified as an excellent location for a path. The problem is the cost to extend this excellent path through previously identified nature preserve. Now, the recommendation to extend is on page 62. The cost to do so is on page 85. The cost as identified is $67,500. The little problem with that is just 6 months ago in this very room, Strand Associates was here telling you the cost to do just that was $2.1 million. That's not in this document. So the Castle Creek Conservancy path, and actually on the pavement issue you were just looking at, that area is also identified in this plan as potential green space for future attachment into the Castle Creek Conservancy. That's on page 66. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. So the Castle Creek Conservancy path presentation, when you pull out all the elements and string them together, taken as a whole, is nonsense. Another example of these errors is with the pool. We say in the plan that an outside pool is preferred by 39%. I spent 35 years in marketing, and I can tell you that that survey had some real fundamental problems to it. But fortunately, there was a referendum just a couple of months later in which 60% of the population said, no, that's not in this plan. So I think you have to actually deal with a few factual omissions. And I would encourage you to set this thing aside and not approve it tonight. I don't want to go on, but I don't think you can make policy on the basis of some incomplete or omitted information. Thanks.
Thank you. Others, Tracy? Was there anyone else who'd like to make a comment in regards to this? Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing portion of this. And I guess from a perspective of comments that were made, Brian, do you have any comments about those?
No, I mean, I would definitely not allow, the election should have no impact on your decision tonight is the only thing I would say.
Okay. And with that, do any other commissioners have any other comments in regards to that after what you've heard? Joe?
Is there any sort of driving factor to get this approved this month versus next month? Is there an impact on,
Not really, other than the hope is to have this run concurrently with the town. But I guess the longer we wait, and that our current plan is essentially expired from the state, from the perspective of grant application. So that would be the only caution.
Kevin?
Since there's not a huge hurry, what's the possibility of getting a rebuttal to the comments that were just made at a future meeting?
I suppose, I guess the question I would have is a rebuttal from whom? I would say that there was no intent to mislead that I'm aware of regarding the pool survey, because the survey data from the corp plan was the survey data. The survey data from the referendum was what it was. There was no intent to mislead. It was just reporting the results of the survey in the plan.
Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess the only other thing I want to add, kind of to maybe piggyback off what Tim was saying, is by adopting this plan, whether the village board and the town board do it, doesn't bind you to do any of this, particularly if costs increase. And the fact of the matter is, I don't believe that this is something that is part of our comp plan, but municipalities adopt comp plans all the time. It doesn't mean that we're going to go out and spend money if we adopt the comp plan in 2023 and then we want to do the work in 2028 and the cost is doubled. We just don't do it. So you're not binding the village board, if the village board adopts this, to go ahead with any of the plans. It's a plan. And we view it in that way. And if to the extent that the village board wants to allocate money to pay for trails in the future, they'll have the discretion to do that, whether, notwithstanding the fact that or they won't be bound to do that even if they adopt the plan.
Go ahead, Brian.
And just to add to that, so the plan is identified projects, but by no means in the time frame that this comp plan is established that all or any of the plans or projects may get done. Some may, some may not. It's just identifying what those potential projects are, correct? And then the funding is going to be a whole other mechanism, even though there may be a budget from the original plan, it's going to come down to today's dollars, whenever that is.
Correct. And the other thing that this will do then by adopting it is should dollars, grant programs, et cetera, become available and we wish to apply for those funds, we can say we have this plan that identifies project X or Y at which this grant would be applicable to. And now when those projects would be scored, we'd say we have a adopted corp, which would be complying with at least the Knowles Nelson stewardship. There are likely others as well.
Gary?
Yeah, Chris, I'll make the motion to approve the 2023 through 2027 Waunakee Westport Comprehensive Bicycle Pedestrian and Outdoor and Recreation Plan.
Okay,
Second.
we have a motion
Second.
and a second. Any other comments? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, next we have a public hearing and discussion action on amendments to the village zoning ordinance, chapter 133 relating to exterior lighting standards. Tim?
Okay, thank you, Chair Zellner. These items are found on page 16 through 25 of your packet. So we've talked about this. I think this was first introduced in December along with our sign code, or at least the notion that our sign code would be changed. We thought that this would be, I would say, a lower hurdle than the sign code. There's a lot of layers to the sign code, as if you started looking at that yet. But so what this attempts to do is create a separate section within the village's zoning code that all the lighting standards live under. Our existing standards are found on pages 24 and 25 of their packet. And as you can see, there aren't many. So one of the things that this will do is help move us toward, from a regulatory standpoint, what I believe has been talked about in several years with respect to dark sky standards, as has been mentioned in many plan developments in terms of regulatory framework. But I'd just like to point out a couple of things. For example, one of our current standards is a light trespass or a light capacity at a property line of 3 foot candles. That's our current standard. What this proposes is to go down to 0.4 foot candles. So that's significantly less, but it's also consistent with many surrounding communities. So whether it's like Middleton, Fitchburg, Verona, Sun Prairie, they're either at 0.4 or 0.5. we're not doing it because they're doing it, but I think other communities are doing this because they wish to minimize that light trespass on adjacent properties. That's just one example of one of the standards in here. And speaking of standards, I think that's the other piece is what this does is provide a much more robust set of metrics, objective metrics, that when developers come in with a specific project and with their photometric plans, we can say, yep, it meets these standards regarding shielding, light fixture height, foot candles, et cetera. Now, the one piece that admittedly is going to probably slow this down, and I guess I will take responsibility for that at the dais this evening, is a more enumerated section. This is new section 1304, which is on page 22 of your packet. That is in the current placeholder is a relatively generic standard. When I say we, Sue and Bill and I met this afternoon or this morning rather to talk about these standards, been conferring with the village attorney. And we've come to a place at least where we feel comfortable moving this forward as part of the lighting package. I have forwarded this to the school district because they have not had that much time to look at it. They have not commented. So for that reason, I'm changing my motion this evening to allow for additional time for the school district to comment on this specific piece or others, but this one in particular, because what this will do is it won't just apply to athletic fields by schools, but also by private providers as well as the village. So for example, if we have new parks in the future and there are other ball fields and there's requests to place lighting associated with those fields, the village as an entity would still have to come and get those site plans approved here that meet these standards. So with that, I guess I would be open for any questions.
Okay, before we do that, since we're bringing it back, should we still do the public hearing tonight? Right. Okay, so I'm going to open up the public hearing first. Is there anybody who had any comments in regards to this?
We did receive one written comment, and that also was placed at your desk from a Caleb Gottwald. And so his comment had to do with color temperature of lighting and consistency of color temperature. This proposed ordinance does not address that. That's, I guess, up to you if you want to go there in terms of regulating color temperature of light.
Okay, Tracy, any others back there? Any other comments? State your name, please.
Name is Don Kearney. I have a question. If you take your existing,
Don, can you go up to, yeah.
push the button?
Just make sure it's green.
Okay. Yeah, the question I have is if you take like the convenience stores in Waunakee, any one of them, are you kind of thinking about that so that if somebody comes in with another one or something where there wouldn't be restricting that? How's that kind of flowing with what works? Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think this will restrict those types of uses. I think it's especially like I'm thinking the Quick Trip on Main Street. There were some provisions that I think had some light levels there with respect to the fuel canopies. I think this is easily met by uses like that, especially with the newer lighting technology, LED lighting, shielding, and so forth. So it shouldn't have a dramatic impact on those uses.
Any other comments? Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing. Gary?
Yeah, if there's a non-conforming business today that sells their business to someone else, do they have to then that new app or occupant, do they have to meet the standards?
No, they would not. So we already have, well, I would say there is a section in what Tim has drafted, section 1305, that gets to the non-conforming, but really what we're doing here is we're just referring back to a section that exists in our code right now to deal with that exact scenario that you're talking about. Now, if they wanted to make changes, like you said, at some point you hit a certain, for if something is a legal non-conforming use, but then the property owner wants to make changes I think it's by state statute. I think it's like 50%. If they make 50% improvement on their property, then they have to bring everything up to code. But just simply purchasing it and then taking over the business, as long as there's not changes to the lighting or otherwise they'd be okay.
Brian, any questions? Chris?
Do you know of any other temperature lighting regulations from other nearby towns?
I don't personally. I guess I'd have to do some digging into that. I'm not saying they don't exist, but I think that's less the norm than more the norm. That may fall more under things like design covenants. But if you'd like, I can be happy to follow up at the next meeting.
Yeah, if this is coming back, if you wouldn't mind, thank you.
You know, that,
Gary?
I mean, I do like that comment that this gentleman made, because that's something I never thought of. And when I buy the wrong light bulb and I, have cool white light bulbs and then I put in a nice yellow one, it drives me crazy. So, I mean, it seems like a little thing, but it may be something in a design standpoint that would make some sense.
Brian?
This is coming back, though, correct? Or table. it.
Kevin?
No questions.
My only question is actually from a legal standpoint, if we're modifying any of these things, do we have any legalities that we'd have to work through?
So we always have the ability to make changes to our code if it's based on, for example, especially when it comes to lighting. Clearly, there's been advances in technology that allows for, I'm just gonna use I believe for athletic fields, for example. I think the lighting that can come in now does a better job of lighting the field, but still trying to keep as much of that light on the field as possible without moving out. So I do think, I think if my understanding is Tim has put this together by looking at other communities, that's certainly a rational basis to come up with whatever the regulations are going to be. I think the organization is excellent. I think it's really good to have more objective standards in here. And that's what this does. Now, you can debate the level of the objective standards, but the idea of having them makes sense, and I think makes the new ordinance more easy to uphold from a legal standpoint. And I think Gary touched on the other issue, which is existing businesses that do not comply with this, as long as they comply with what would be the old ordinance, they're going to be fine. And that's another way to protect new ordinances from a legality standpoint. Doesn't require people to go out there and make a bunch of changes.
Okay, then I'm gonna make a motion to table this. Do I have a second? We have a motion and a second to table. Any other comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, next we have discuss and take action on site plan for the expansion of the first floor space at 200 South Century Avenue to accommodate an office use.
Thank you, Chair Zellner. This one is a fairly straightforward request. David Dargenio, who I believe is here somewhere, there he is. WIA Insurance is going to be moving their office space to the building at South Century, and they want to expand the usable office space on the site. They wouldn't necessarily be expanding the footprint of the building. They would be enclosing the front sort of arcade porch area as part of the first phase. And then the second phase, they would be enclosing the rear drive-through area, which was the former drive-through area of the bank. So the exterior building materials, brick, the hardy plank siding, and the details of the windows, I think would be a great addition to what the building is now. And I'm talking to the applicant. He's indicated this would be sort of a midterm use of the building until such time that visioning process that we've been talking about for a while may come to fruition, where this site could be reimagined into something else. But this is, the office use is a permitted use. It's just that the change or the expansion of the office footprint itself and the building exterior is coming before you as a site plan. So staff is recommending approval, available for questions.
Questions, board commission members? I'll start with you this time, Joe. Any questions?
No, I reviewed it and looks good to me.
Gary?
No, I'm good with it.
Chris?
Nope, looks good.
Brian,
I'm good with it. Thank you.
Brian,
Same, I'm good.
Kevin?
No questions.
Sounds like I'm gonna make the motion to approve the site plan as submitted to allow for the expansion of the first floor space at 200 South Century Avenue to accommodate an office use.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Next, we have discuss and take action on a site plan for the conversion of the first floor space at 100 Baker Street to an assembly coffee shop cafe use. Tim?
This one is another site plan review. This is the former space of Millhouse Quilts. This would become another coffee shop in the village. If I'm okay with the naming the tenant, is that okay? Grace Coffee would be the tenant occupying the space. This would be in addition to the a boutique hotel on the second floor. There is a fishing assembly business on the lower level. So this would create a nice activation for the space and be a nice destination potential for the downtown. So staff is recommending approval. One thing just to point out that it is likely, and you saw this in the site plan, that they're planning for future expansion of an outdoor area on the north side of the building. That would require a conditional use permit. That would come before this body probably in the very near future. So let's see, the applicant is here, but again, this is just site plan review, recommending approval and available for questions.
Gary?
No questions. It looks good.
Brian Wallace?
No questions.
Kevin Phelps?
I guess, Tim, is there any issues with occupancy levels as far as, you know, what that was built for versus how many people are going to be in there now, along with parking, you know, is there enough spaces?
Yeah, so their site plan does show parking, additional parking right now. I think that's more like broken up sort of gravel pavement. That area could accommodate more. In fact, they will be adding some more parking stalls immediately along this would be the northeast lot line. But in terms of occupancy, yeah, the occupancy will be fine. That'll be reviewed by a building inspection department for occupancy load.
Brian Melch?
Sorry, nope, no questions.
Chris Thomas?
No questions.
Joe Zitzelberger?
On the, I guess, northwest edge, as far as parking goes, you said that's gravel currently?
Well, it's crumbled pavement, gravelish. Yeah, it's.
Is there a desire that be paved or?
So they would, I think if and when the CUP for the outdoor space comes back, we can revisit that, but currently with the way their site plan is shown, they don't need to use that space for parking. So it's not necessary at this time.
Okay. And then a question regarding the inside. I'm not seeing any sort of real divider as far as smaller spaces. Is there an intent that might happen in the future, or is the idea is to keep it wide open?
I would defer that to the applicant.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. The goal is to keep it a wide open space. So when people come in, they can see the architecture that's been there for a while. So we are trying to maintain that historic nature of the inside.
Excellent. Great. Thank you.
So I don't throw anything at me, specifically a shoe, but I've never been in a Grace Coffee. So I'm just curious, is it mainly a coffee shop or is it food as well? Or just if you can expand on that?
We're like a restaurant.
You guys.
Sorry, can you stand up to the? So you could use this as well.
There you go.
Perfect. Yeah, so it's mostly like a restaurant. Like we have full breakfast, brunch, lunch. We make 40 different kind of croissants a day. We roast our own coffee. Pretty much our company at this point is vertically integrated. Like we have opened 7 locations in 2 years. This will be our 8th, and we're building 2 in Milwaukee right now.
Great. So what is your plans as far as timeframes? The public always wants to know when there's something new that's opening. Trust me.
Yeah, we're thinking in opening in like June.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ryan.
Just There is a development agreement that's associated with this property that did anticipate this potential coffee shop going in, but there is language within the development agreement. And so just page 30 of your packet is the motion for this, and we would just add subject, it says right now, it says subject to final review of the fire inspector to ensure appropriate fire access. And we would add subject to final review by community development director to ensure compliance with development agreement.
Okay, so we are ready for a motion if one is ready to be made.
Well, I would make motion approval with the addition of Brian's comments. This motion to approve the site plan as submitted by Baker Street LLC to allow the conversion of the first floor space at 100 Baker Street to an assembly coffee shop cafe use subject to the final review of the fire inspector and ensure appropriate fire access, along with the comments that Brian has added.
I second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any other comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, guys. Next, we have discussion recommendation on a request by Dalmatian Farms LLC for expansion of the urban service area to include 40 acres of the land adjacent to and south of the intermediate school on Woodland Drive. And this would be an item that's recommended to the village board. Go ahead, Tim.
Correct. So this is a request by Dalmatian Farms LLC to expand the village's urban service area. The area is shown in orange. That would be the land that this request would be subject to. Essentially, what this is doing is directing staff. Again, as you mentioned, Chair Zellner, this would go to the village board, but we're directing staff to formally make the request of CARPC or the Regional Plan Commission. That's the entity that's going to actually approve of this. So we're just looking for direction that it's okay to move forward with that application. And it's really that simple. This is a formality that's necessary for all provision of utilities and services. This was the most recent one, I think, was done for Heritage Hills last year. So recommending approval, available for questions.
Brian, any other comments from you?
Nope, I agree with what Tim said.
Awesome. Any other comments from the commissioners? Brian
Motion.
Wallace. Go ahead.
Make a motion. I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the urban service area amendments to the village board and direct staff to provide a status report to the JPC and seek any comments they have on the matter.
Can we have a motion? Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Chris Thomas. Any other comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. And then we have our joint plan agenda for tomorrow. For our joint plan members, enjoy Valentine's Day there. I'll say that right off the bat. Anything we need to go over, Tim? We pretty much.
I don't think so. This last item will be appearing before the Joint Plan Commission tomorrow. There is a initial consult on a certified survey map, and then we'll be discussing the possibility of appointing a new chairperson to that committee.
Okay,
Motion to adjourn?
we have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a second. Any other comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thanks, everyone.